First question is from Ted Colfin, Detroit News.
Let me try that again. Hey, Steve, how are you doing today?
Good, Ted. How are you? Thanks.
Good, good. Let me just start off with this. The trade today, getting Nedeljkovic. How pleased are you to acquire a young talent like that?
Well, obviously we have high hopes for Alex based on his performance this year in Carolina. Younger guy, with who we feel has a lot of upside. So yeah, again, we're pretty excited about it. He did very well this year. Everyone in our organization is familiar with him from his local ties, playing junior and whatnot. So we know his character, his work ethic, his competitiveness. So, and watching him play this year, we felt it was a good opportunity to get somewhat of a younger goaltender with still some upside and can help us win more games.
I just have one on the draft, Steve. How difficult was it? I mean, we've asked you a few times during this whole process, just to devise a sheet of, a group of guys that you think you're going to be interested in or whatnot, with all the difficulties in the scouting this year and all. Was this as kind of a unique process as you've gone through as far as the draft?
Yeah, in some cases you're talking about players who didn't play this year. And for our scouting staff, it was a challenge for them to see some of the players, to travel, to get to certain locations. It has been challenging, interesting, but I think Chris and his staff have been very diligent and very thorough and really done the best they could. But ultimately, I would guess this draft class would moving forward is the most unpredictable of generally very unpredictable process.
Sounds good. I'll let somebody else go on here. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks. Yep.
Next question, Helene St. James, Detroit Free Press.
Steve, in making this trade and the one for Nick Leddy, do you balance improving the current team versus, you've used a couple of assets, but you still have picks in the second round and the third round? Is that kind of an advantage you have, that you can improve the current team, but without really a huge cost to the rebuild to the future?
Yeah, again, we're trying to improve our team. Ultimately, our goal is to build a playoff team, a Stanley Cup contender. That hasn't changed. In the interim, we're trying to give some of our younger players, surround them with a more competitive team. And at the start of the rebuild here, as we've witnessed for the last few years, is we trade your expiring contracts, your older players, your veterans at the deadline for future assets. And we've been collecting those future assets. Some of them are on our team. And in this particular draft and next draft, we have so many picks. Even in the last 2 years, we have so many picks. At some point, we need to put players on the ice, put a team on the ice. In our position, it's difficult to get those real impact free agents. The way you can get some players on reasonable contracts is via trade, as we did with Mark Stahl last year. We do for Nick Leddy this year. So we're trying to surround our younger players with good players to help them develop a good partner for Phil Hronik, strong goaltending, some forwards that can complement, Dylan and all of our guys. So I just think it's important. There's a balance. We're not going to, mortgage or sell all of our assets, our draft picks off, but somewhere along the way, you kind of, balance the trying to be a little bit more competitive with rebuilding. And again, with having so many draft picks, without, selectively, we can use the odd one to try and improve our team for the short term, because I believe firmly there's benefit in having good players for the younger guys to play with. It can be very difficult, a bunch of young kids out there in the NHL playing games. It can beat you up after a while, and we want to be competitive.
Now, I know we've talked about, you've said you guys need help at every position, but given how Alex is quite young, do you now, looking ahead to the draft tomorrow night with the first pick, maybe weigh a guy's offensive ability, whether it's a forward or defenseman, a little bit more? I mean, versus, I mean, we know there's a very good goaltender that's expected to go in the top 10, but how much a priority is somebody who can help you offensively, given the struggles this team has had to score?
I guess, Helene, we're going to pick what we think is the best prospect, that who has the most potential with the 6th pick, regardless of position. Where we are at and where we're picking and the age of the kids, it's too hard to really, I think, draft for a specific need. I think that, I'm not involved in the NFL or maybe even the NBA, or I'm definitely not involved in them. But I think they're similar. These kids, their draft choices are older. They're 21, 22, 23 years of age. They're men. They're not teenagers, and you have a better idea of where they're going to play that next year, so you can draft more specifically for a need or a position. I believe in our situation in the NHL, that you take who you feel is the best prospect, and you try to balance it all out with your depth chart of prospects. But ultimately, especially in the first round, I think you need to go with the best prospect.
Thank you.
Next up, Max Boltman with The Athletic.
Hey, Steve, how's it going?
Good, Max. How are you?
Good. Hey, so on the Rasmussen contract, obviously also announced today, do you anticipate kind of more RFA contracts, whether it's Tyler, Jacob Vrana, Philip Hronek coming soon, or are those still a little farther off in the timeline?
Yeah, I expect to get them all signed. But it's pretty, everyone is, I think, kind of from a team perspective, we're focused on the draft this week anyway, or this weekend, and next week you'll get into unrestricted free agency for a few days, and then so the agents, I believe, are tied up. Of all the players are kind of focusing on their unrestricted guys. Everybody was tied up with the expansion draft, so we get into next week and then really hopefully bear down and get to work on all the restricted free agents.
And then on the draft, you mentioned the number of picks you guys have had. I mean, would you be interested at all in packaging any to move up from maybe the Washington pick more so than 6? Is that something you've had any conversations on or have interest in?
It would depend on those trading up or back scenarios. Really are decisions made during the draft, kind of when you see how things are playing out and who's there or who's not there. You kind of make those decisions along the way. So to sit here and say, yeah, we'd like to trade up or trade back, I don't know at this point. We'll see tomorrow.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah.
Next up, Art Regner, DetroitRedWings.com.
Hey, Steve, how's it going?
Good, Art. How are you?
I'm doing well. I only have about 10 questions, so I'll try to be quick on these.
Fire away.
First one I'm really kind of curious about, and I've wanted to ask you about him. Maybe an under the radar signing earlier, Wyatt Newpower. I mean, the assumption was that because he was a Cleveland Monster, Columbus would take him, and that the Red Wings swooped in at the 12th hour and got him. Does he have a legitimate shot at making the team, and what can you tell us about him?
Well, we watched him play in Cleveland last year. We played a lot of games, obviously GR versus Cleveland. Good size, pretty good skater, pretty competitive, and we're looking to add with young D. So we thought he was on an American League contract last year in Cleveland, and as we're watching these games, our staff are also watching players on the other team, and him. We had interest. We weren't sure if he was going to sign a deal with Cleveland or not. As it turned out, that wasn't going to happen for whatever reason. I don't know. And we just felt he has some upside there. He's, again, a good skater. He's very competitive. He's got decent size. So thought it was a good opportunity for us to try and acquire another young player that has some potential.
When you look at this year's draft, and you said earlier that you think that maybe, the thing is, if you go into, like, in this case, 32 war rooms, usually in a draft, everyone's draft board sort of looks the same. Some guys might be a few stop higher for some teams, some guys lower. But that the feeling is that this year, as you said, is wide open. does that mean, what do you rely on? Do you rely on more of an eye test now? Or do you use the new metrics as, when I think Corsi, I think of a pizzeria or something, but I mean, how different is this going to be for you, I guess, considering everybody was pretty much landlocked to the country they were in this year?
Well, again, we scouted and assessed the same way we could. Just a lot of it was more video. But in each country, the guys that were able to attend games in person did that. We were limited to get our ability to get for the US guys to get into Canada. We were limited to get into Europe. But I think our staff is, we got all the areas covered that we could see. So I think, again, it just goes back. It's a little bit more unpredictable. So ultimately, yeah.
I was just going to say, I didn't mean to interrupt you. So you think it really, I mean, you're going into this tomorrow having no clue what could transpire, right? I mean, this is a really wide open draft. If I'm not trying to read into it, but that's maybe your thought heading in.
Well, I don't want to say we have no clue. We have somewhat of a clue, but that remains to be seen as well. Yeah, again, it's going to be very unpredictable. I don't know how other teams what their lists are. We don't have access to that. Obviously, we look at a lot of, in the media, some of the different lists that the sports networks put out and whatnot, and read those for curiosity. And even they're all over the map. So, yeah, again, it's going to be an interesting day tomorrow, interesting weekend.
Losing Dennis Chalowski in the draft, which the expansion draft to the Kraken, you knew once you signed Leddy that could be a possibility, I guess. How disappointed, or did you kind of expect that maybe he would be the player taken?
I wasn't really sure what Seattle was doing. Certainly when we made the trade, and we're now, anything we've talked about leading up to the expansion draft is okay. How does that affect us? Our protected list, whatever we did, ultimately, we felt that this was, we went ahead and did it, that we felt that they were willing to take that chance. We really weren't sure if Seattle would go after Dennis or one of our veteran forwards, or D-man for that matter. Really weren't sure what they were going to do, but ultimately felt, we were comfortable in acquiring Nick, and what we could potentially lose in the expansion draft. We were prepared to do that.
All right, and one final question. I know it's not 10, but I'll be quiet here. Is that, have you started any kind of talks with any of your own unrestricted free agents? Hope to get them done before the 28th.
Yes, I have.
And are you close with anybody, or can we expect, like a midnight press conference or anything?
I don't know. Again, from right now, I'm looking at the draft. We're getting ready for the draft tomorrow and Saturday, and we've had some discussions with our guys, and we'll see what happens.
Great. Thank you very much, Steve. Appreciate it.
Okay, Art, you bet.
Next up, Brad Gelly, WXYZ.
Steve, thanks for the time, man.
Yeah, no problem, Brad.
With Nedeljkovic, was goalie a priority for you that you wanted to solidify and finish as you looked at the offseason for maybe a few weeks or months now? And I guess if you could maybe just, how did that all come about? Because people in the hockey world are all looking at this going, what was Carolina thinking letting a Calder finalist go?
Well, that's you'd have to ask them why they were comfortable doing that. I don't know. For us, we had a decision to make. We had Jonathan Bernier obviously here, was a pending UFA, and then again had some discussions with Carolina regarding Alex. And for us, again, it's a chance to get a younger goaltender. The kids that we have in our system are probably a ways off from playing in the NHL, and we thought this was a good with Thomas Greiss under contract for one more season. Try to bring in a younger goaltender that has some upside, and that has potential to be our starter for a number of years. So he's relatively inexperienced at the NHL level, but we think he's got real good potential, and has a chance to play for us for a number of years.
Tyler Bertuzzi's in an interesting spot, and I know his name has been floated out there by people that you may not think have much say in all of this, but he's in an interesting spot bouncing back from an injury. Is he a guy, Steve, that people have called you on to ask if he is available for trade? Could we expect him to be moved?
My goal is to, and I've talked to Tyler about it. Our goal is to figure out a deal that, and we want to keep Tyler here in the organization. We like him as a player. We certainly like him as a person. And it's my hope that we can figure something out that he remains with the Red Wings, not only beyond this year, but for a number of years in the future.
Have teams called about him though?
Teams have called about a lot of our guys, all of our good players. Happens all the time.
Thank you.
Next up, Carly Johnston, Red Wings TV.
Hey, Steve, thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, I know we're talking a bit about age earlier in with Rasmussen being 22 and Nedeljkovic being 25. Is age a big factor when you're signing contracts, or does that just become a secondary factor to think about?
Yeah, well, age certainly does. It depends, certainly if a player's in his mid 30s or later 30s, you're concerned about the term of the contract. And likewise on a young, unproven player, you're kind of, if you're going to go with term, you got to be, prepared. So, or be certain as to what your, what your upside and what your downside is. So the term on every contract, regardless of the age, has some impact. So yeah, things are different. Like with Alex, I was 25, 26 years of age and being relatively inexperienced at the NHL level. You can play for a long time, and that's pretty, kind of your prime years. You get into your mid 20s, your 5th, 6th year as a pro, regardless of American League or NHL, you're entering your prime. And we think he's at a good age that he can, develop with us, with our core of young players, and be a good goaltender for a long time.
For sure, excited to see him with the winged wheel on a sweater. I know Art was asking you a bit about Dennis Cholowski with the Seattle Kraken. I know it's sad to see him go, but are you just happy for him to be able to get an opportunity with a brand new team, and start a franchise? Yeah,
well, Dennis is a really nice young man. He's worked very hard here. It's been a difficult 3 years, kind of up and down. And that's really out of his control. That's, for the last 2 years really has been my decision. And it's been hard for him to get settled. Our hope this year was, just to start in the American League and just for once, just play regularly. The pandemic and the change of our schedule threw that for a bit of a loop. And then ultimately here we are, and we have to make a decision in expansion. And again, time will tell, right or wrong, but we had to make a decision, and felt that for our hockey club, where we are, what we need, that we I don't know if afford is the right word, decided to expose Dennis and run the risk of losing him. But I really would have liked to have kept him because he does still young and theoretically has potential. But again, we felt the trade-off was worth it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Next up, John Wawrow, Associated Press.
Hey, Steve, just looking at the trade that you just made, just as we saw what Seattle did in being very cautious with its salary cap, how beneficial is it having cap space to make deals like this and improve your roster at this time in this flat cap era?
Well, cap space gives you the opportunity to do things and go in a lot of different directions, whether it's make trades simply to improve your team, sign free agents, or in this era, bring on players and get assets from teams that need to create cap space. So generally, the really good teams in the league don't have cap space. So, I think we'd all love to be in a spot where, man, I just won the Stanley Cup and I got to move somebody because I need to find some cap space. It's a nice problem to have. For us, we're looking at it, I don't really know, because they're not about to share with us what Seattle's plan was going into it, into the expansion draft. But for us, we look at it where we are. We're trying to be very selective and careful as to how we use our cap space, how much money we spend, the term of contracts, and we like to be careful and take or wait for opportunities to come along that make sense for us. So that's really kind of what our thinking is. But it's very, very valuable to have cap space, and but we'd all love to have a great team and be at the cap as well. So
Thanks a lot.
Next up, Kevin Allen, Detroit Hockey Now.
Hi, Steve. I wanted to ask you about the availability of Alex. It's rare that we have a younger goalie like that move. And I wondered, coming into this, because of the flat cap and because of the expansion, a lot of general managers said it was going to be an odd summer and there were going to be opportunities that you don't normally see. Is that one of the cases here? Were you sort of anticipating there might be some unusual situations that you could take advantage of? And secondly, are there more of them out there? Is there more than usual, opportunities that maybe wouldn't be there under normal circumstances?
Well, I think we're somewhere between last off season and normal circumstance this year. I really had no clue what was going to happen last year in the off season, what teams were going to do. As it turned out, the free agency period, based on signings, based on some of the trades that were made, opportunities, the teams that had a ton of cap space were able, I think, to kind of take advantage of that. And some teams got very good players that in an unrestricted free agency that I think we all kind of maybe anticipated prior to the pandemic would garner higher AAVs maybe. This year, kind of going into it, it looks like teams are a little bit more aggressive. Is that because there's a new team in the league, therefore the talent's being spread out even more, and everybody needs ultimately 7 or 8 defensemen and 12 or 13 forwards. So it kind of makes these players a little bit more valuable. It looks like there's some opportunities maybe to do some things, but I think teams are, I think it will be a little bit more closer to normal this period than last summer.
And just a quick follow-up, how tricky is it, Steve, to sort of, figure out the equation between keeping roster spots open for younger players to move up and then, adding some veterans in to, keep your team competitive?
Yeah, well, there's some younger players and this goes throughout the league that you're pretty certain they're going to play next year, and you're never 100% right, but there's some guys that he's just ready to play based on what they did in junior or what they did in the American League, or you're just simply saying, you know what, he's playing in the NHL this year, he's done his time, it does no more good to be in the American League, he's playing. I guess I look at it as, if they were dominant, whether it was in college or dominant in junior or dominant in the American League, if they probably weren't, in all likelihood for a young guy, you might be safer, kind of letting them force their way into the lineup and err on the side of, filling those roster spots with some good solid veterans, maybe on shorter term contracts to buy yourself some time. So again, every now and then there's a player in your organization that you just have a strong feel they're ready to go, and you keep a spot open for them. Otherwise, I've tried to take the approach, if I'm not real certain, let's fill that hole and we'll wait and be more patient with the young guy. But Kevin, it's not it's not an exact science. It's a bit of you kind of use your experience, kind of a well-educated guess. But like I said, I've always kind of gone by, God, he's just too dominant. The ideal situation really is, they've been in the American League, and you kind of, what baseball does, you try them out at the end of the season, see how they look, and then you get a better feel for it at that point.
Thanks, Steve.
Yep.
Our last question's from Ansar Khan, MLive. You're muted, Ansar.
Lost your answer.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Sure can.
Okay. Say, Steve, just looking ahead to free agency, are you in the market for another left-handed shooting defenseman, and is Mark Stahl a possibility?
Definitely. We kind of wanted to wait and get through, see what was going to happen through the expansion draft, and yeah, absolutely. Now we're today and tomorrow, really getting ready for the NHL draft, and got to hone in once we get through this draft on what we do on our left side. Actually, we lose Dennis Chalowski in the expansion draft. That's a hole. With John Merrill traded, Patrick Nemeth traded at the deadline. We have some holes to fill there, and I've been in touch at the end of the season with Mark. I've had been in touch with his agent, and that's something that we will really look at here in the next few days.
And then similarly, up front, right shooting forwards, I imagine you're in need of a few of those. Is that something that you'll be looking to?
Ideally, yeah, we'd like to add, or from what's on our board right now, we'd like to add some right-hand shots, whether that's with the players, some of the players that from last season, or we go out into the market. That's something we need to address for sure.
Just one more, Steve. With Petruzzelli, is there still a chance that you could sign him, or is it kind of moved on from that?
I don't expect to sign in the near future. If Keith goes back to school, I'm not sure what his decision will be. That would be for him, but we can consider it in the future, but not at this point.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
Yep.
Those are all the questions we have for today. Thanks to everyone for joining us, and Steve, thanks for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks, everyone.